This episode of the I Am Salt Lake podcast is brought to you by Sorry Clementine Clothing, located at 366 South 500 East, number 104, in beautiful downtown Salt Lake City.
This is episode 39 of the I Am Salt Lake podcast. I am your host. I am your guide. My name is Chris Hollifield. This is my show. Like I said, I am your guide from episode to episode as I lead you on that journey through our beautiful city, introducing you to locals, professionals, musicians, just everyday people, people that are making the area just a little bit better to live in, making me proud to call it home. So thank you for joining in. If this is your first time, I suggest once the episode is over, go to iamsaltlake.com. You can listen to each and every episode of the podcast directly online. You can download it and listen to through your smartphone or MP3 player. And let me know what you think of the show, especially if this is your first time. My voicemail is 385-202-5926. It'd mean a lot to me, and to let me know what you think of the podcast. This has been a really fun project that I have been doing here for the past little while. Also, I want to tell you, our friends over at City Weekly, they're doing the Best of Utah Awards. They're taking nominations right now. If you go to cityweekly.net/bestofutah, you can fill in some really fun categories. And it would be really neat if you just took a few seconds and wrote in I Am Salt Lake for favorite podcast. There's also some really other fun recommendations. My friend John over at utahmusicians.net is a really nice, it's a great nomination for best favorite local radio. And then Sorry Clementine, my wife's store, you find a category for her favorite thing about Utah. Some really other really great categories, and it takes just a few minutes. cityweekly.net/bestofutah. Anyways, this episode I was able to sit down with Brad Chapman. He is a local voice coach, but he's not just any voice coach. He's had some really amazing talent that he's been able to work with. I mean, I'm talking the Bullet Boys, Anita Baker, REO Speedwagon, the Bangels, Def Leppard, Motley Crue. Just go to his website, bradchapmanvoice.com. Well, I'm going to list all those over at I Am Salt Lake, and you can connect with them online. And if you're looking for a voice coach, it's just a really fun conversation regardless. So anyways, sit back, relax, listen to the conversation that I had with Brad Chapman. Maybe you'll learn a little bit, and if not, I'll be back again on Sunday with another episode introducing somebody a little bit different. Anyways, this is the conversation with Brad Chapman. Thanks for joining us on the I Am Salt Lake podcast. Give me a little bit of a history kind of about yourself, where you grew up, and how you kind of got into becoming a voice coach.
Okay. Well, I am a Utahn. Grew up in the Mill Creek area, which is adjacent to Holiday. You know, some people don't know what Mill Creek is, but it's basically that area of Skyline, Olympus High, and so forth. I went to Evergreen Junior and Olympus High. My love for music started when I was in elementary school. I was playing trumpet and silly, I think I played the baritone horn for a while. But when I went to junior high and I was playing trumpet, they had booted me, meaning they upped my level to the concert band, because the sixth grade teacher thought that I belonged in a slightly more advanced. But the man who was running the class was he was a nightmare. He was just crazy. He was yelling at us all the time and saying, "You guys can't even count to four," and silly things like that. And I said, "Okay," and this was a part of my rebellious time in my age anyway. And so I said, "Okay, I'm not going to have anything more to do with this." Plus, I just got braces, and playing the trumpet was hurting anyway. So I had enjoyed rock and roll on the radio and so forth. That was the music I listened to. So I met a kid, his name was Bob Knibbe, and he played guitar, and I said, "Well, how could I join your band, so to speak?" He was playing with one other kid, and he says, "Well, what do you want to do?" And I said, "Well, I just want to sing." And he says, "Well, we can't really just have somebody who just sings. We really need a bass player." He says, "So if you learn to play the bass, and I'll help you learn, then you can join my group." So I started off as a bass player, and I don't know that Bob and I ever did any actual gigs, but I know we practiced outside and things like that. So
What kind of music were you playing?
we were covering the Animals and
Okay.
pretty much what was popular at the time. I don't think we did any Monkey songs, but that was certainly that part of that they were a big part of that era. The Doors. As I got more into music, I started liking the more eclectic bands. But that came later when I moved over to guitar, which I did when I was about 16. And we had done some gigs. I can't. Some guy found me on Facebook the other day from when I was 15. He remembers me, and I don't even remember the people I was playing with at that point. But he said he remembered helping us take our equipment to the old mill.
Wow.
And playing there. And I do remember playing the old mill. And I was the aggressor. I usually put the musicians together, after Bob and I split up. Playing the bass just wasn't enough out front for me. And I'd seen Deep Purple live, and Ritchie Blackmore just blew me away. And I said, okay, I got to play something that is really exciting like that, because he was such a dynamic performer.
Wow.
He was with Deep Purple.
Where did you see Deep Purple play?
At the Terrace.
Wow.
So that was pre-Salt Palace.
Wow.
That was the place we all went for rock bands before the Salt Palace opened up. And within about 6 or 7 months, I don't know, I went crazy with the guitar. I was playing it a couple hours a day, and the band, I think at that time it was Johnny Walker and Jody Wilkinson, who owns Acura. Jody Wilkins Acura. His dad was in the business of selling cars, and then he went into that later. And Eric Freeman played bass, and there was a local group out of Murray called the Bro Brummels, and a fellow named Steve Whitman was the lead singer, and he had attracted the attention of Jim McNeil, and Jim was at the University of Utah and had come here from Minnesota, I believe, or somewhere in that area, and he had a very wealthy family that he'd come from. And he was a frustrated drummer who hadn't gone well for him. And so he decided he was going to be a band manager and booker. So he booked us, and that time the group ended up being called Celebration. And with Steve being a really popular guy around here, we moved up pretty quick. We were starting to do all the...
Played quite a bit of shows.
Yeah, we were doing the Union Ballroom, which was a big place at the time at the university. And, because Jim was... active in the university there, we did frat parties and things. And then the biggest thing that we did where we got attention was we actually did the Salt Palace.
Wow.
With Bread as the main act. And
you opened up for Bread.
Yeah.
Wow.
Do you remember who they are?
I'm familiar with them, yes.
It's a 70s.
Yeah.
It's a late 60s,
approximately
early 70s.
What year was this approximately?
Well, I was 17, so I had to be like 69.
Wow. That must have been...
It was weird. We were all bouncing around like crazy backstage, just really nervous,
I could imagine.
And then when we walked up on the stage, as soon as the lights hit us, everybody but Steve mellowed out. And we remember how nervous he was, because he told the audience how nervous he was and that they scared him. We were just like, Steve, why did you say that? But he was good with the audience.
Yeah.
I'm not saying anything negative about him as a performer. He was great. So like bands always do, we broke up, and I went. Jody Wilkinson and I started writing some songs, and kids are like, we're going to be stars and we're going to write songs.
So you weren't doing any singing quite yet?
Yeah, I was.
Okay,
I was,
okay.
but Steve was better than I was, and so
Okay.
and he was a lead singer. He did play an instrument, so we became a 5-piece at that point. So that stopped, and then I went back and worked with my dad for a little while. Guys who've been through bands can get frustrated because they break up a lot. And unfortunately, they break up when they get successful.
Yeah. Why do you think that is?
Without being a registered psychologist or anything, I would just say fear of success.
Yeah.
Especially with Steve. Steve had a lot of problems with that. He went on to a group called the Lawmen, and United Concerts was actually working with that group, and they got that band, and I'm not sure if it's the Lawmen, but anyway, I'm going by memory. They got them a tour with Cheap Trick.
Wow. And
Steve immediately started self-destructing, not showing up for rehearsals and getting drunk, and he's just
destroying himself.
Basically, and it's not an uncommon thing, unfortunately. It's one of the reasons that the bands who are successful are so incredibly rare and become so wealthy, because people love them, but they're so hard to put together and keep together and actually make into a success. It's just unreal. It's probably one of the hardest businesses there is to succeed, because people are doing it on their own time for their own reasons. Nobody's getting paid, especially at the beginning. And so it's hard to keep people involved and disciplined.
Yeah.
So then Jody and I decided to put together a nightclub band so we could make a full-time living at it. And at that time, and there's a little history for Salt Lake, at that time there were plenty of clubs that you could work 5 nights a week.
Wow. See, and I include as much Salt Lake City history as you would like, just because I love to hear about it.
You know, coming back from L.A., and I don't even remember. Yeah, when I left...
Now, what were you doing in L.A., just to kind of backtrack a little bit? What you went to
I
school?
went there to find out how to...
Play music.
How to improve my career, you know, because I just knew that I'd been on the road, traveling around the Northwest, and, you know, had an agent, and we'd done all that, and it just didn't look like it was going to grow, and I just was a growth-oriented type of person, and so I had to try to go somewhere and find something new and exciting and more interesting. And so I just moved down there, you know, 28, you know, and kind of a manic kid, you know, just figuring he can just move down there and work it out, figure it out.
We all do that. I moved out east in my early 20s, you know, just to travel and get around, you know.
Yeah, and so anyway, after we did the nightclubs things with Jody and so forth, I started putting together bands, and I called it Chapman and Company, because musicians, again, are kind of hard to work with, so I started contracting them so that if I had to let somebody go or if they left, the club owners wouldn't be concerned that we'd change names. You know, because bands generally, when they make it a partnership, if somebody leaves, then the band starts all over again. Okay. And I wanted to work, so we just always kept the same name. Yeah, so kind of going back to just traveling the Northwest and doing nightclubs, and there's one club here in town that we did. Oh yeah, we were talking about the 5 nights a week club. There was one club in town that's still here that we worked quite a bit, and that's called the Fifth in Bountiful. At that time, it's called the Fifth Dimension.
Okay, I don't even know. Are they still around? Or not?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. That's what I say. It's one. I think it's the only one I can think of that I've seen that's still there. At that time, there was a family which was, you know, for gossip's sake, was. A lot of people consider them mafia guys, and they owned the Watergate and the Black Bull and Caesars, and these were clubs around Salt Lake that were fairly successful. I think a different guy owned the Iron Horse. I'm not sure, but we worked most of those clubs, and we were able to make the 5 nights a week thing allowed for full-time living. Now, there's no clubs doing that, so making a full-time living here, even just as a
musician.
Yeah, is really tough because you can only do 1 or 2 nights a week. A friend of mine, Joe Muscolino, does very well doing casuals, meaning a lot of parties and weddings and conventions and things, but that's become more and more difficult as the years have gone by.
So what led? So this is what led you. When did you decide to become a voice coach? Then what?
Okay, so I went to L.A. and started asking around and trying to get information. And one of my personal frustrations as a singer was I couldn't sing the high notes like Stevie Wonder or Robert Plant or whatever, except for in falsetto, which was not acceptable. So I was kind of like a frustrated athlete who couldn't run fast.
Okay.
You know, it's like I see these guys, you know, just going past me, and I'm like, I can't do that. And when we were doing Top 40, we had to try to imitate the original singers. So I felt internally, personally, that was one of my biggest drawbacks. I could entertain the audience, I could talk to them, I could get them wound up and all that, but I couldn't hit the notes. And musicians get frustrated because the singer will say, well, we need to lower the key. And then the band's going, well, but then the song won't sound the same. And, you know, so it's a little bit of a battle there. So I was asking around, and a fellow named Dan Whitley, who's also back here in town now, had a studio in the Valley. I think he was in Studio City. And I auditioned for his act. And it didn't work out for what he was looking for, but I don't remember exactly, but I just asked him some questions. He says, well, you know, there's a teacher here in town that has worked with Stevie Wonder.
Wow.
And I thought, oh, there's somebody who can teach me how to sing high? Because I couldn't find anybody here in Salt Lake because they were all classical. They wouldn't touch rock and roll with a 10-foot pole. They didn't care about it. They didn't want to know about it. I would take a Stevie Wonder record to Betty Jean Shipman, and she would just say, "You don't even want to think about doing that." Well, I'm 22, making a living at this. Of course, I want to know how to do it.
Yeah.
So I just had to quit. So I found out that there were singers that were famous that were taking voice lessons. To me, it was very exciting. So I got his number and I called him up and I started working with him, studying with him. And at that time, my vocal habits were so bad and were so wrong that I took myself off stage for about 2 years and just worked technique because I had to quit reinforcing the bad habits. And I couldn't get on stage without reinforcing the bad habits. It just...
So you during this time you were developing, like you said, bad habits. So you okay.
Yeah. So I just studied voice for a couple of years. And when I felt things were back in place, then I started to look at doing some gigs again. At that time, I did end up back in Salt Lake for a couple of years because I was working with a management company out of here. And so that was taking time, and I was just doing a few gigs here and there. I remember doing Geppetto's, some solo gigs. There were some clubs that were still doing four-nighters, and so I put together a little casuals band, meaning we just... I would use different musicians on different nights even. And just getting by, waiting for this thing to happen. And I thought, I loved the way I was taught voice, and I know that no one's like that in Salt Lake. So I thought, why not try teaching it? And that really, if you knew me, that would shock you. Me teaching anybody anything it still surprises me.
Still blows you away.
Yeah, the fact that I'm doing it now is just... Anyway, so... I decided to try it, and I fell in love with it, and I would be doing gigs and teaching and doing gigs and teaching, and the gigs got less and less interesting, and the teaching got more and more interesting, and I basically just quit teaching. Doing gigs. And
went to full-time teaching.
Right.
And how did you start getting some of your first clients?
Well, I became what was known as a Seth Riggs associate. He's the guy I worked with in L.A. And, again, Salt Lake didn't know anything about any of these people. They didn't know about Seth or that there were voice teachers who taught rock stars.
And roll, yeah.
Yeah, and he doesn't really teach rock and roll, but he did teach me a technique that can be used for rock and roll.
Gotcha.
So I was able to develop it for my personal use, and people like Stevie Wonder are able to do the same thing. He's really a classical teacher, but his way of teaching works for rock people. Anyway, so I used his name and his celebrities, and I started putting 8x11 flyers at Progressive Music and local music stores and did the little ad in the Yellow Pages. And things grew pretty fast. I was starting to make a full-time living at it. And so, that was great. And some people seemed to wonder about my credentials because they didn't know who Seth Riggs was, and they didn't know if the whole thing was legit and so forth. And these were people that I had known from previous years that were trained at the university and so forth. So I decided to bring Seth Riggs up here for workshops.
Up here from now where?
From L.A. to Salt Lake.
L.A., okay.
One of the things that I did that was unusual that made sense to me was to, just like you're wearing headphones right now, I would teach with headphones on my head, headphones on the singer's head, and we would use mics so that the voice lessons were pretty much preparing you for studio work. And or, of course, live work if you have a good monitor system. So I brought Seth up, and he saw that, and he saw how I was succeeding, and I think he came up for 2 or 3 seminars. That's what we did. And I did it mostly just to legitimize myself because I was getting, like I said, some question from some of the people I know. So they saw him, and they started to realize it was a cool thing. And all of a sudden, one day, he calls me up. I'd been teaching here for about 2 years. Calls me up. Well, actually, I called him a lot for the first couple of years while I was teaching because I wanted to do it right. And if I had a question about a student, I would just pick up the phone and call him, and he was pretty cool about that. And one day he says to me, "Well, why don't you come down and be my partner?" And of course,
wow,
being a growth-oriented guy, again, I was like, "Wow, this is great! I'll go back to L.A. and make more money." I'll, start working with more professional musicians and so forth. And so I became his partner in '83, and then I was his partner probably for about 3 years. And we split up. Don't know if we should go into the reasons, so we won't.
No need to.
And I went on my own in LA. And again, I was doing fine, working with more celebrities on my own, getting my name around. There was a magazine. You were asking about how I get the word out. There was a magazine in LA called The Music Connection, and it was an industry magazine. So people looked at it from the industry to get information about how to improve their careers and, read different people's articles, producers and different bands and so forth. They interviewed me, and I remember Pearl Jam was on the front page.
Wow.
So they had the picture of Pearl Jam, and then over on the little left-hand side, they said, the Chapman Report on rock vocals was their line. So again, I was doing pretty well, but just some family problems came up in Salt Lake that were emergency oriented, and I had to leave it. So
decided to come back to Salt Lake City.
Yeah, and actually didn't teach at first when I got here. I did electronics work because I was a little burned out on the teaching, and I wasn't sure this was the right place to really make a living at it compared to what I was used to.
Yeah.
But that didn't work out all that great, so I got interested in teaching again, and now I'm all excited about it again, and I'm trying to get the word out and really let people know that there's someone here who really understands the true music industry and knows how to actually succeed in it and what are the actual things that you have to do to accomplish your long-term goals. And so that's basically what I'm motivated to do now.
Who are some of the musicians then that you've worked with over time? I mean, I know you've worked with some pretty big names.
Yeah.
You've had some really good opportunities.
Well, there was Anita Baker, who won 8 Grammys while I was there. She's, I said what was the fun thing about being in LA is you got talent that was already highly developed before they'd come to you. And then that was particularly fun because she had released a Songstress album, which was pretty much considered her first album, which she'd done well with, not in the main genre, but in the R&B. Mm-hmm. Somebody gave her the R&B Singer of the Year award. I can't remember who it was, but anyway, so the album I got to work on with her was called Rapture.
So is that typically how it'd be with a voice coach? Then they would have one album that they would work with a musician, or is it just for as long as the musician wanted?
Depending on the person.
Just depending on the person.
Yeah, I think generally I made my living on people who just were interested in learning to sing.
Okay.
But we also got projects, and that's where I get the multi-platinum records from. I get projects, and so I worked with the Bangels, their project, REO Speedwagon had a project.
And I mean, how was it working with these bands? I mean, I'm sure you were fans of theirs. I mean,
yeah, that was a little weird at first.
So yeah, you were probably like a little starstruck at first.
Yeah, very very intuitive.
Nervous, maybe.
Mm-hmm. You're right. Very good.
But I'm sure you kind of within time realized, they're just people too.
Yeah, and they act more like people when they're in a situation like that, meaning they're comfortable.
Yeah.
Just briefly, the main thing about artists that make them, or successful artists that make them look so aloof and so prima donna-ish or cocky or whatever word you want to use, they only have so much time in the day, and everybody wants a piece of it.
Yeah.
And they just have to say no, and so they basically have to build up a wall hoping that you won't even come up and talk to them, because the last thing they want to do is tell you they don't have time for you. And so they were pretty cool in that situation because it was work.
So who were I know the Bullet Boys too, right?
Yeah,
you work with
Mark Twain.
Okay.
Yeah, that's another incredible talent. That guy can sing high notes like it's unbelievable.
And any other well-known acts that might get a kick out of hearing?
Well, yeah, I briefly mentioned REO, and I wanted to add on to what you said about being starstruck. See, REO came out in '67, and so that was my teenage years playing rock and roll. And so here I am in 1987 teaching a guy that I had looked up to when I was a teenage rock and roll guy. Yeah, so that was the hardest one. I didn't really know Anita Baker that well, and the Bangles hadn't had any success yet. So that was the biggest trip. The actors that I worked with, we talk a little bit about like Kirstie Alley and so forth. They didn't bother me that much because.
Oh, so you did okay. So you were a voice coach then for actors, is not just musicians.
Actors who sing.
Oh, actors who sing. Okay.
Yeah. So there was Kirstie Alley, Rebecca De Mornay, who was the star of Risky Business with Tom Cruise.
Okay.
and Sandra Bullock. A lot of people are surprised when I say, well, an actor I've taught how to sing. They say, well, those people sing? Well, they
maybe
do,
in a movie or something. Huh?
Yeah, movies, or they have lives on live stage. In other words, most actors and actresses can sing, dance, and act. And some of them can model, like Tia Carrera.
So do you think anybody can be taught to sing then? I mean, if they're
That's been my
even
experience.
if they have a horrible voice, when they come to you, you feel that they can be taught to be able to sing, huh?
Yeah, that blows Sandra away, my love of my life. She listened to some of these people come in and, what was the term you used, squawk or something like that. And then within 6 months or whatever, she's like,
They come in
much
and
better.
you're just like, oh my gosh, you have to put earplugs in to. So you do some voice coach lessons though via Skype though, right? Is that, or no?
Yeah, no, I do some of that.
Okay, but a lot of these you would do in person.
That's the best way.
The best way.
But I've been able to help Deborah Magoni out of Rochester, New York, who's a Grammy member, and Rachel out of West Hollywood, who's a Grammy member. Because I'm a Grammy member.
That way, because you're here in Utah and they're out of state,
yeah,
you can connect via Skype. And is it more because you can hear each other? Or, I mean, I guess you could see face to face.
Yeah, that's the biggest part. That's better than the phone.
Okay,
is you can see their physical body language, and sometimes it's important for them to change that. Another act that I worked with that was very successful in the 80s was Expose. At that time,
not familiar with them.
They were one of those 3 girl groups.
Okay.
They had
one-hit wonders.
No, they actually did better than that. Seasons Change was one of the biggest hits. They went multi-platinum.
Okay. And you probably play one of their songs, and I know. Okay, and now you know.
Yeah, I do need to post some of their stuff on my webpage. I haven't done that, but Jeanette Gerardo was the girl that I was teaching in L.A., but she called me about a year ago and said, we're back on the road, and Joya, who's another one of the lead singers, is having trouble with a cyst on her vocal cords. And so we worked on Skype, doing voice therapy to help her get on the road and stay on the road. So every once in a while, things like that happen where I'm reconnected with some of the people I worked with back in the 80s.
And so then, so they don't have to come to you or travel here. They can just do it via Skype. What's been, I mean, obviously working with some of your idols, I mean, or not, but favorite musicians. I mean, what are some of the other rewarding?
Kevin was an idol at the time.
What have been some of the other rewarding things of doing what you're doing or being a voice coach?
Well, yeah, like beside hearing your work on the radio, that's always a big charge. But no, the daily charge I get is seeing people change.
Uh-huh.
And like I said, I never would have been a teacher. In fact, I've tried teaching guitar, and I can't do it because that's a very structured form. Everybody comes in, you teach them pretty much the same thing, and they go home and practice. No, it's not what I call interactive teaching.
Okay.
This voice work is very interactive. I give you an exercise, I hear what is happening, and then I decide what exercise to give you next. There's never a planned program of what I'm going to do from one lesson to the other. And because these exercises are what we call cause and effect, meaning I hear the problem, I give them an exercise which causes a better effect, it's very exciting to watch the changes.
I could imagine. So actually, let's back up just a hair. You mentioned hearing a song on a radio. So you're driving, because obviously you kind of, okay, I helped them with that song what was it like the first time you heard REO Speedwagon or one of those guys with a song on the radio, and you're like, wow, okay, I helped them with that.
Yeah.
I mean, was that just awesome or what? I mean,
well, yeah, it was.
I mean, let's be honest. Let's.
It's voice teachers, voice coaches, whatever. I mean, most of the work we do, we see it right in front of us, but we don't see it out in the public.
Yeah.
And so there you are in your car, and the Bangels Manic Monday comes on, and you go, I worked on that. And there's a little story you might enjoy about that.
Share away. Yeah, let's hear it. I love the Bangles, so
cool.
So you
remember that song?
Yeah.
Well, who actually wrote that was Prince.
Oh, wow.
And for whatever reason, he used a pseudonym. So on the album, he's called Christopher.
Okay.
But he had seen the Bangles at the Hollywood Palace and thought, hey, I like this. It's a 4-girl group, and they're really cool. And he fell in love with Susanna, who was the one everybody fell in love with. And so he gave him that song. But what's funny is they brought in the demo. The girls did. They brought in the demo and says, okay, here's what we're going to be singing. And if you've ever heard that song, the girls did it very upbeat. And it's very fast tempo, da 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 da. Well, Prince's version was da 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 da, like he was half there.
Yeah.
A very depressed, bluesy feel.
And the Bangles didn't want to go with that.
No, they went totally the opposite. I mean, it was pretty much 180.
Yeah.
And it worked.
Well, the song's great. I mean,
well, you talk about how sometimes people in this business kind of control things for a while. Prince was number 1 and 2 through the Bangles that month. And so it was kind of fun to see if Manic Monday was going to take over. I can't remember what song he had that was number 1 at the time. I don't think it did. I think Manic Monday ended up number 2. But that was kind of interesting. He's almost not competing with himself. He's a little bit like Pepsi and Coca-Cola. It's the same company selling the same, selling a product with 2 different names on it and benefiting from both.
So did Prince write a lot of songs in for other bands, or was it just kind of the Bangles?
I don't know. That's a good question.
Interesting.
That never came up.
I mean, I like Prince as well, but I'm not familiar with his extra writing, I guess, for other music. Interesting.
We never talked about that.
I'll have to do some research on my own now, and maybe
you'd have to look it up.
Maybe report back to everybody.
Yeah, that'd be fun because Chris. I don't even know why he used a different name on the Bangles record.
Maybe that's his real name.
Well, it could be
his born name.
Could be.
You never know.
I mean, maybe he, like you say, maybe he doesn't want people to know that he writes for other people.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting possibility. You could look that up and see if he's used other names on other songs he's written for different acts.
Explain the concept "sing from feel." I saw that when I was looking on your website. Explain? I mean, it sounds interesting.
Well, it is, and vocal technique is what I started with.
Okay.
And one of the things I learned from working with celebrities is that you can't change them too much. You kill their career.
Change them in what way do you mean? Like
so-called better.
Okay.
Meaning from a vocal technique perspective, you have certain standards you're trying to accomplish. You're trying to help them balance their larynx. You're trying to help them sing on pitch better. You're trying to help them extend their range. So vowel shapes come up. And the point is that if you're not careful as a technique teacher, you can take a rock star and make them sound entirely different and ruin their career. So...
Because I mean, we distinguish musicians a lot by their voice.
Right, exactly.
And when a band gets a new singer, a lot of times, you should maybe change their name too, because the singer is kind of what makes the band up, in my opinion. I know a lot of people disagree with me, probably. But
well, I think from an audience perspective, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
From a musician's perspective, no.
Yeah.
The drummer makes every band.
Yeah.
Just depends on the position you're in. And
yeah.
Being a singer in bands and a musician at the same time, one of the things that I noticed was the constant conflict between being a singer and the musicians. They don't like singers generally.
Really?
So
is it because they get the spotlight a little bit more? Maybe?
Mostly, and we're kind of wusses, meaning that we're dealing with an instrument that has a limitation of how many hours we can do things, and musicians don't in comparison. As a guitar player, I could play 4 or 5, 6 hours and not get tired. As a singer, especially in a high-energy concert, an hour and a half, you could be pretty wasted. The vocal cords just don't like that kind of use.
So speaking of vocal cords, while we're on that subject, I mean, some of these rock musicians that scream a lot, how do they not destroy their vocal cords? I mean, I don't know if you've really worked with any musicians that have had to do a lot of,
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, how do they, especially night after night of touring, I mean, what are some tricks, or how do you, is it just building the muscle or what?
Well, we wish, because that would be a pretty easy solution.
Yeah.
Become a bodybuilder and then you can handle, doing all that. But singing is... Well, my apologies. We'll let that go.
Not really sure where we left off. I'm trying to remember now. My mind.
Do you remember? You're good at that.
Oh,
the growling.
Oh, the
screaming.
Yes. Okay. The scream. How they don't kill themselves, wear themselves out. I mean, is there just techniques, I guess, to learn? Huh?
Yeah, there are, and actually, one of the differences between teaching in LA and teaching here is how much voice therapy I did. I did a lot more voice therapy in LA than I do here. 2 reasons. The growling is a big, it's a big seller.
Yeah, well, it's popular now.
Yeah, exactly. And it's been popular really since, the 50s.
Okay.
Even John Lennon, when he sang Twist and Shout, was trying to growl like the black guys were.
Well, even not growling, but just that...
The screaming.
The certain, just to be just even the high energy singing can get exhausting.
Yeah, it is. I think that the easiest way to understand it is to liken it to being an athlete.
Okay.
You want to give the audience something exciting, and if you don't give it to them, they don't really come back and see you again. So you get out there and you give them everything you have, and it beats you up.
Yeah.
And so part of what I do for them is give them vocal exercises to get their voice back. I recommend that they go to steam rooms because steam is probably the most natural therapeutic method that we know of, because the steam goes directly to the vocal cords and soothes the swelling. Basically, what vocal fatigue is not muscle fatigue. That's why I alluded earlier. It'd be nice if it was, because then you could build it up. It's actually more of a ligament or a nerve ending fatigue. And what it means is that as your vocal cords are vibrating, especially under stress, they're swelling.
Okay.
And when they start to swell, you start to lose tone. And the singer who can't talk, or like a laryngitis situation, that is the cords so swollen that they won't vibrate anymore.
Interesting.
So, you've got anywhere from your voice feels great to you could lose it completely depending on how swollen they are. And the screaming and the growling adds to the swelling.
I could imagine.
Yeah, because you're literally slapping those vocal cords together in order to create that sound. Legit singers, classical, opera, try very hard never to do that. They try to keep their vocal cords vibrating without touching. But even opera singers, they get cords swollen up and they have to tour anyway, and then those cords start to hit each other because they're puffed up. They're losing distance between the cords, and they can get nodules and lose their voices just like anybody else. So basically, it's trying to keep the swelling down.
Yeah.
And physical therapy does, to try to keep muscle swelling down and try to keep joint swelling down, we use exercises. A lot of people think that drinking hot fluids will help, and it will if you sip the steam off of the hot liquid. But the liquid itself never touches the vocal cords. So it may make your throat feel better, in other words, your esophagus, but it won't literally help your vocal cords unless you sip the steam off. Cardiovascular exercise helps because the blood flow, the increased blood flow, heats the blood vessels and helps bring the swelling down. Again, singing better technique, in other words, singing high notes in a way that lowers the amount of effort that it takes to do the same function is a big part of what I do. So a guy may be yelling to hit his high notes, but he's killing himself and he's burning out very quickly. Well, there's another way called developing the second registration, or some people call the head voice, will give them the same power and take a lot less effort to get the same job done.
Interesting.
But part of it, I remember when I was in LA, I learned that Steve Tyler of Aerosmith was doing 2 shows a week. That's all he could handle. And so that's how he gets through it.
Does he still only do 2 shows a week? Or do you have no idea, probably?
Well, he has been on the air again. In fact, the National Geographic did a program on him, and they talked to doctors that he works with back east. He gets surgery on a somewhat regular basis because he hits those cords so hard together that he creates hemorrhaging.
Interesting.
And they have a laser.
Now, you didn't work with him at all?
No, I didn't,
okay.
but I've seen the shows.
Yeah.
But what happened was Adele lost hers, and so a lot of the publicity got done on this, and so I watched as many of the shows on it as I could. And some of the doctors are just telling the artists, you can't do what you're doing as many times a week as you're doing it. You're just going to have to cut your shows back. And that's what
Is that pretty typical for musicians that maybe are older, or is it more that have been doing it more years, I guess would be a better term to say than older?
Actually, if you treat your voice and your body well, your vocal cords get better and less affected by stress as you get older.
Interesting.
But if you continue to abuse, it's like anything else.
Yeah.
You just get worse and worse and worse. So it depends on how the artist handles it.
Drinking, smoking, that's probably not too...
right.
That could take a toll year after year.
Well, those things swell up the cords, especially cigarette smoke, because when you draw it in, you swell them up. The reason you cough when you take your first drag off a cigarette is because your vocal cords are telling you not to put that in your lungs.
Interesting.
They react immediately. They swell up and you start coughing.
Huh.
But, of course, we're brilliant human beings, and so we go, well, I can get used to this.
Yeah.
So we keep dragging in the smoke, and the cords become chronically swollen.
Now, I knew before all the clubs banned smoking in Salt Lake, before they did that, I remember bands would come here and they would request to make it smoke-free.
Right.
Because I knew like a lot of the singers and stuff just couldn't handle it.
Yeah.
Because they were used to the other clubs in the United States being smoke-free. And Utah, believe it or not, was one of the last states to outlaw inside smoking, which blew me away. And I actually was a smoker for many years, so one of the worst habits you can have.
Yeah, I agree with that. I was when I was a teenager.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like, what the heck was I thinking? It's the worst. Anyways, let's, before I forget, I want to talk about the multi-platinum record.
Did you want to go back to the Sing from Field thing?
Oh yeah. Let's jump back there. Sorry. You're keeping me in control more than. Yeah, I just don't want to. There's so much, I just want to make sure I get it all. But the Sing from Field.
So as I started to understand technique's place in today's music, I started to understand more and more that it's the feel that the audience buys, not the vocal technique. Like I say, you take somebody like Adele who has incredible feel. And that's what people are responding to, is her emotional state while she's singing and how we all relate to it and how we feel it inside. And that's what really motivates us to put those records on, watch her on the Grammys and all that. It's not her vocal technique that really turns the average audience on. And I learned this by teaching people who were not celebrities to sing in great vocal technique and not get very far in their careers. And we're all just scratching our head going, how come, she can sing high and she can sing great notes and she's got great tone and, why aren't people standing up and giving the ovations and so forth? And so I've been thinking about this for a long time, and I thought, even though I wasn't a voice teacher when I was a teenager, I still thought Bob Dylan sucked as a singer.
Really?
I thought, this guy, how can anybody listen to this guy? He's like, wah, and off pitch and all this stuff. I was a real snob about it. And I even remember asking some girls who liked him, I says, how can you like him? She said, how can you like that voice? And I remember their response was, we were talking about a teenager, obviously it sunk in deep in my brain. They said, but he's so sexy. And that still freaked me out. How can a guy who sounds like that be sexy? But what it is about him, I call this my Bob Dylan epiphany. He emotes emotion stronger than almost anyone.
Well, you could feel it in his music.
Exactly. This is why I came up with this concept. And the other thing that helped deepen my opinion was Bob Dylan made the top 10 of the greatest vocalists in the world in Rolling Stone magazine.
Wow.
They did the top 100, and he was in the top 10. And I thought, okay, this is really starting to make sense now. I decided to add on to vocal technique this concept of sing from field. And basically what that I've learned to do through techniques, and I do this in the studio. I've been working with some artists in the studio as well, where instead of focusing on vocal technique, which is actually a mistake in the recording studio, I've learned, because when you're in the recording studio, you're trying to create a live performance on a medium. You're not trying to do your best. Okay. You're not trying to make everything perfect. that makes a recording sound very boring. And a lot of recordings, most amateur recordings, do come out that way. You go, oh, that sounds really nice. And of course, you put the recording away and you never listen to it again. Then you hear somebody who's the Lumineers right now. That guy is quite off pitch quite often. I'm not slandering him. That's just his way of singing, and people are loving it.
Yeah.
So the ultimate singer is the one who's feeling his singing. He's the ultimate singer is not the one who is thinking in his brain, I'm perfectly on pitch, I've got great vowel shapes, I'm really hitting that high note. Wow, listen to how great my rhythm is. You know, these are what I call subtexts.
Yeah.
Meaning that he may be singing words, but what's really going on in the brain is, how am I doing this? How am I, what vocal techniques am I using? Am I struggling to hit the note? Did I just hit a flat note? I know a lot of us complain about when we make a mistake, we're still thinking about it 2 verses later, because we can't get it off our mind. And so part of learning to sing from feel, and this is what Bob Dylan is so great at, is ignoring your vocals while you're doing them. You never pay attention to your voice while you're singing to an audience or in a recording studio. You pay 100% of your attention to the lyric, the story, what it is that you're actually communicating to people. And so vocal technique supports that because it removes potential restrictions, meaning that if I sing really off pitch, but I really feel it, some people are going to be a little turned off by that. And so I may lose them. Yeah, let's still do vocal technique. Let's still sing in a way that people are always happy with what they hear. But our number one goal is to make sure that we're feeling the music so the audience is feeling something. And, it could be anger, it could be fear, it could be love, it could be excitement, could be depression. Whatever that singer is talking about is what the singer should feel so the audience can feel it. So when I'm teaching, I've come up with a quite concrete sentence. I say, I let them know, if you feel it when you're singing, if you're crying, then your audience will cry.
Do you think most musicians really do that, though?
No, it's a star concept.
Yeah.
I came up with a way of explaining that. There's amateurs, which are people who are just trying to learn how to do things. How do you hit a note, or how do you play a note on the guitar, or whatever. That's amateur stage. Just how do I do this, and then start to achieve your abilities until you can do it second nature. Then you become what I call just simply a professional. In other words, someone who does things correctly, has the audience with them basically, but is not really all that exciting. Then the next category I call the star, and this is where I put Bob Dylan. He's an incredible star. You can't really, you can argue all you want about it, but he's sold so many records, it's unreal.
Yeah.
And Carole King, who's a songwriter, who decided to actually sing on one of her own albums in the 70s, that album is a historical album. It was on the charts forever, sold millions and millions of copies. And she didn't sing as well as Aretha Franklin, but she sang Natural Woman on her album, which Aretha Franklin had done earlier, and sold more copies of it than Aretha did. Those people are people who maybe not sing that well. They may not have great vocal technique, quote unquote, and they may not have great control over pitch and quality and whatever terms you want to use, but people still love them intensely.
Yeah.
Because they have this star ability, this feel. The next category I go to is what I call the superstar. And this is where people like Anita Baker fit in, Barbra Streisand, Celine Dion, Steve Perry, Christina Aguilera, Katy Perry to some degree. They're highly functional artists, but they also feel it incredibly deeply. So they're the top. They're the cream of the crop. And so obviously that's what I want to teach everyone. I want them to be able to be a superstar.
To sing like the superstar musicians.
Yeah. So technique is part of it, but also sing from feel is part of it. And it's kind of an advanced concept in one respect. You either have to be able to ignore your mistakes, which is a skill in its own. Because Anita Baker once told me, I hate my own voice. I said, wait a minute, you have millions of records out there. People are going crazy every time they hear you sing, and you hate your own voice.
I think most of us hate our own voice, so.
Yeah. And so you have to learn to ignore that. You can't let that affect you. And she does. When she's like almost kind of two different people. When you meet her, she's kind of a hyper, kind of angry person. But when she's on stage, she's just mellow, internal, closes her eyes and just completely envelops herself in the music.
Which is awesome. You could feel it in her
That's
music.
what people react to positively. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So she has that ability. People who don't come across that naturally they've got to learn to quit criticizing themselves during performances. And I don't mean criticizing like negatively. I just mean they can't be thinking, am I going to hit the next pitch? Am I going to remember the fifth word of the second verse? I mean, all those thoughts have got to be gone.
Yeah.
And of course, obviously, the best way to do that is, as musicians will always tell you, you have to pay your dues. What does that mean? That means you do it until it's right. You keep practicing it until it's good.
Which is going to be different for every musician, really.
Absolutely. Depends on what their goals are. Once you have established, okay, even Bob Dylan had to memorize his lyrics, right? He had to memorize the chords on his guitar. He had to memorize the melody. So he, and I don't mean, again, like he's totally dysfunctional, but even he had to at least absolutely have those things memorized before he could emote emotion. So you take somebody like Christina Aguilera, she's got all of these chops, and that's the word she used on The Voice, plus she can completely envelop herself in the emotion. So that type of singer, to me, the reason I call them superstars is because they have to put in more time, more effort.
Interesting.
Because they've got more to memorize. Rappers, who I think are great emotionally, don't have a whole lot to memorize.
Because they don't have to put as much emotion into their music?
No, they do. They put a great amount of emotion into it. But they don't have to learn how to sing high. They don't have to learn melodies. They don't have to learn complex licks like a Christina Aguilera can do. I mean, it's just not part of what they do. So they're very free to go right to the emotion because they don't have to spend as much time working on the technical aspects.
I gotcha.
And again, that's not a put down. They're very good at what they do. And Christina, you can't say, well, Streisand's a better singer, so she can rap better than Eminem. I don't think so. I mean, these guys have got their own skill, and if you want to be good at it, you've got to pay your dues just like they do.
Yeah. Have you worked with any like hip hop or rap musicians, or not really?
Not anybody you'd know. Every once in a while, I'll get one.
Interesting.
I did read that Drake is trying to add vocal technique to his abilities.
Huh.
Because hip hop back in the 80s, when hip hop was when rap was the main word that we talked about, they didn't use many singers. It was all just the rapper.
Yeah.
But now hip hop is a mixture.
Yeah.
And so they usually have, just like Linkin Park, they usually have a singer and a rapper. So Drake apparently has decided to take on the responsibility of doing both.
If you could pick any musician that you haven't had a chance to work with yet, I'm curious who would you love to work with? Like who would be the ultimate dream?
I would love to work with Adele.
Oh, I love her music.
Yeah, I would, because I would get such a big charge out of making it so she could do much more on the road than she's doing. You
think you could make her career better?
Yeah. You can take this as cockiness if you want, but my experience has been that no matter how good the artist is, when they come to me, they're better after they work with me, because I can hear things they've never thought of, and I can add that to their arsenal.
Yeah.
And Adele's thing, I couldn't improve her feel, but the fact that she goes on tour and has to cancel
because of her voice.
Yeah, that's a big problem.
Yeah.
For her and her audiences. And it's a big problem for her managers and her musicians and all the concert halls that had to cancel their tickets and send them back. And
yeah.
I mean, those are huge problems, and I'd love to solve that for her. I'd love to see her doing more shows a week and not having to worry about losing her voice.
Well, I wish I could tell you Adele was listening right now.
Yeah, I wish. Yeah. And even if she was, who knows? But I contacted Kevin Cronin of REO about 15 years after we hadn't seen each other, and I just said, "Hey, how you doing? I'm back. I'm in Salt Lake now. What are you doing?" And he says, "Oh, I'm still on the road all the time." He says, "You basically saved my life." And what he meant is that because he changed his vocal technique, And on my website, you can hear before and after. You can hear him singing in 1981, and then you can hear him. It was 80. No, it was 85. You can hear him singing in 85, and then you can hear him in 2010.
Interesting.
And his delivery, his vocal technique is far, far superior. And he said, because of that, I can continue this touring. They've been on the road now for about 45 years.
Wow.
Every year they go out, and they do show after show. When they were here, both times they were here that we went backstage and met with them, they got right on their buses and were right on their way out to another show.
How do they do it, right? You know?
Yeah, and he says that he feels that I had a lot to do with that. I mean, obviously he had to put it to practice.
Yeah.
But by the advice I gave him, he is able to just constantly do more and more shows. And I remember when we were working together, his first tour that he did, he came back and he said, we were able to pay for our light show by the extra shows I was able to do.
Because of your voice lessons.
Because of the voice lessons, yeah.
So if you're listening and you want to have an awesome voice, this is a guy to get in touch with. Seriously.
Oh, thanks, Chris.
No, I mean, I'm serious. I was watching some of those videos on your, you got the YouTube videos on your website, and I mean, you can hear a difference.
Cool.
You can hear a difference, and well, let's jump now into the multi-platinum.
You asked me what do I enjoy. It's just like things like what you just said.
Well, no, it's
you can hear the difference.
I think it's important to hear feedback. I really do, and I think as people we don't give enough feedback, negative or positive.
Right, we're afraid to.
If somebody's doing something, a lot of times they're not. If they don't know it, then they might stop doing it, and you need to keep being a voice coach. So now I want to hear about this multi-platinum record. Okay, now let's jump into that one and kind of as we kind of wrap this up here. I want to make sure to touch everything and get everything, but I want to hear about the multi-platinum record.
From a pragmatic perspective, the main reason I let people know that I have them is so that they know that what I do works.
Absolutely.
You can go to a lot of voice teachers and you can go to voice teachers that charge more than I do. But what is their track record? Has what they've taught people actually been successful? And the gold and platinum records are hard evidence that what I do creates creates better careers. And so when I've worked on an album project, vocal technique's been part of it, teaching rhythm's been part of it, teaching the feels been part of it. And so it's kind of like we were just talking, I wanted to be a star, and so, I've still got that ego. And so, I've got my platinum record on the wall saying, hey, I'm a star in what I do.
Yeah.
And so, I feel that. Yeah, that's a physical and emotional joy for me. But for you, as someone who's considering working with me, it's saying this guy's real, and I can trust that if I work with him for 2 years or however long I want to work with him, that the results are going to be positive. And you guys don't hear this, but I get people come to me and they say, I spent 6 years with this voice teacher and nothing's working. I'm not getting what I want.
Before people come to you, they're with, okay, I got you.
And I had the same problem back in the 70s when I was trying to find voice teachers around here. I tried a couple of them, and what they wanted me to learn almost got me fired from one band. Because I tried it on stage at rehearsal, and they said, well, if you ever do that again, that's the end of that. So so not to put them down, they just have their particular goals, their particular things they want to accomplish, and that may not be what that artist wants. And so if they're looking at me and saying, well, I think the record industry is horrible, I don't want to have anything to do with it, then they probably wouldn't want to work with me. Those platinum records have no meaning to them whatsoever.
Yeah.
But if that is in their mindset, that is in their goals, they do want somebody who understands today's music and what the steps are to get better at it, then the platinum and gold records provide that proof. Because you can't get them unless you've been involved in the record project. You can't just go buy them. You actually that's not true. You can buy gold records. And you can have your name put on them, but you cannot have the Recording Institute of America insignia on it.
Interesting. So we all learned a lesson there.
Yeah. Yeah, I that surprised me. So, but yeah, you can't. And I mean, you could try. I guess you could always falsify something, but you take the chance of being sued or something later
So
on.
is this your first multi-platinum record, or have you gotten multiples?
Well, I'm expecting a 5-time multi-platinum coming in the next 6 weeks. Some of the projects I've worked on, I didn't get them, and now I'm starting to get them.
Okay.
And so I should get one from Expose. I should get one from Whitesnake.
Oh, you worked with Whitesnake too. I don't know if you mentioned them.
No, I didn't.
Oh, you didn't work with them.
I've got actually no, I did work with them.
Oh, you did.
I've got
There's so many that you can't remember them all.
yeah. If you ever want to see
I think
that,
your website lists them all.
Yeah. If you go to in the photos. Yeah, you did your research. Chris.
Yeah. What is your website, by the way? Feel free to say it now, and we can even mention it at the end. It's
www.bradchapmanvoicecoach.com.
Okay. Excellent. So if you're listening, hit the website up.
That's the best thing to do. And,
Yeah.
that way you can take a look at that and say, well, this guy is either what I'm looking for or he's not. No one is for everybody.
Yeah.
I don't claim to be an opera teacher, even though I do have one student who thinks I'm a great opera teacher, but I don't claim to be one. I don't feel that that's where my major value lies.
Where do you feel you're like, what main musical influence is your strongest, would you say? Like, is there a style or anything that you teach?
I would just say basically the rock and roll that has dominated the industry since the 50s.
Awesome.
I mean, there's been offshoots of it, and I try to keep track of all of them. My roots are in 60s and 70s rock and roll.
Back to the days when you were opening up for Bread, right?
Yeah, those are my roots. And one of the things that we all learn after our teenage years is that it was our teenage years we were most influenced by music.
Absolutely.
That's when we
got
had
us through some of our hardest times in life.
Yeah, and that's when we had the most time to listen.
Absolutely.
When you start working 60 hours a week and you have family and all that, you just don't have time.
Yeah.
And I don't have as much time as I did when I was a teenager.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think, for instance, Muse is an incredibly new act. I just think they're amazing.
Right,
but do I have the time to really get into them like I did when I was a teenager? No, I don't.
Study every lyric in the insert and buy every rare bootleg CD or something, or back in your day, vinyl. Are you still a vinyl collector at all? Or no, not really.
I think my personal opinion is digital is better, but
yeah.
You do remind me of a story. A guy named Moon Martin that I worked with, who's a songwriter. He played guitar for Linda Ronstadt when she was first coming in the 70s as a major influence. And he wrote the song Bad Case of Lovin' You, which he did put on his own album, but then Robert Palmer made the big hit out of it. And that was that, Doctor, Doctor, give me the news. I got a bad case of loving you. That was his big thing. But anyway, we were talking about that in the 80s.
Yeah.
The digital was coming over. And he says, well, I really like the vinyl because, when you put the needle on there and you hear this, he says, that's kind of like the audience in the background cheering.
I love it.
I don't know that I hear that, but he did.
See, me personally, I love to listen to like old Led Zeppelin or something that, or Black Sabbath on like vinyl. There's just something about that the feel of that, that crackling.
Yeah, well, that's what he was saying.
That I love.
Yeah, he liked the crackling.
Newer music, not so much. I mean, I don't know if I'd enjoy an Adele record as much on vinyl as nice. To me, a nice that needs to be a little clearer, But
when I was 20, I took an engineering course, recording engineering course.
Yeah,
and a big thing in recording, and this is where engineers focus most of their attention in, is clean. The cleanest possible recording they can get. And vinyl is not as clean as digital.
It isn't.
So that's kind of how I was influenced. And I think it comes back. Music is very personal. So you should listen to what you want, and you should decide what you want, and you should love whatever you want.
Who are some of you, like, what's your all-time, do you have an all-time favorite band or a couple favorites?
I would put Led Zeppelin up there, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
The Beatles, of course, which was interesting because when they first came out, I wasn't that into them. I think they'd been around for like 2 or 3 years before I really started listening to their music, really started to grasp it.
Yeah.
And how unique it was and how incredibly artistic it was. One of the things that I enjoyed later on about the Beatles was when you listen with headphones to them, you'll hear things you've never heard before that apparently had some kind of an effect on us, almost a subliminal kind of thing.
Interesting.
It's the best way I can explain it. Because you can't hear them, you cannot notice them without the headphones and actually listening. Do you know what stacking is or double tracking is?
It sounds familiar. But feel
well,
free
let's
to...
say we're recording right now. So let's say that we took exactly what I just said or exactly what you just said.
I'll put other vocals on top of it.
And added an exact copy to it. Well, said it again along with yourself.
I gotcha.
Okay. The Beatles, if you listen with headphones, you can hear where they did double tracking very, very much on purpose on maybe 3 words and then took it off, and then maybe later on in the song did it on another 4 or 5 words. But you can't hear that without the headphones on.
Interesting.
And they obviously believed it had an effect, and their success record is kind of proof.
So everybody listening is going to go back and listen to all their Beatles records, put the headphones on, and get whatever message they meant to come across. What other hobbies, and besides music? I'm always curious to know. Cool. I always find out from people, what their main thing that they're doing is, whether it's a craft or music. What other things do you enjoy doing in your spare time?
Tai Chi, martial arts, and
oh wow, there's something
exercise.
I wouldn't have expected.
Well, that goes back to teaching. Actually, I had to sit a lot, and my back started having problems. And I met a student who said, "Well, if you did Tai Chi, you'd have a lot less back problems."
So how many years have you been doing Tai Chi then?
It's been about 20, 25 years.
There you go.
It's a great exercise, and a lot of people don't think Tai Chi is a martial art, but if you get as deep into it as I've gotten, you find that it's actually a very effective martial art.
I could believe it.
The word Tai Chi in Chinese means supreme ultimate. So the Chinese considered this the ultimate martial art. But it's come into this country as a health exercise, which is what I was introduced to it as.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people don't understand the martial arts side, but I got so into it, and I wanted to get everything possible I could get out of it, because it can affect the way you sit, it can affect the way you walk, your daily life, to try to keep the pain down. So I wanted to know everything about it. So I finally found a guy who's from China, and he grew up in the Cultural Revolution, and he learned it, and he knows the real function of those moves, and he knows the real self-defense, and it's very effective. It's very, very quick. It's very effective, and they don't like to use it in movies because movies like to have the fights go on for like 2 or 3 minutes, but Tai Chi master wants to fight over in about 2 or 3 seconds.
Wow.
And so that it's just a whole different thing. And so I got really into that. I used to play a lot of tennis. I can't now because of my knees. And I love to be with Sandra.
There you go.
I'm pretty one-dimensional, I guess. I don't do a whole lot of things.
No, you sounds like you stay pretty busy. So Brad, while we finish up here, I first of all, I want to say thank you so much again for coming on and sharing your story, being a voice coach. People listening, if they want to get in touch with you, I mean, obviously you take new students on all the time. How, again, the website, Brad Chapman voice coach, or what?
Yeah.
Okay. And then are you on Facebook?
Yeah, on Facebook, I couldn't get voice coach in there. So
Okay.
I'm under Brad Chapman Voice.
Okay.
And I do have a separate Facebook page called Sing From Feel.
Okay. And I'll try to get all those links to link it back up on the website so people can go to the show notes of this episode of the podcast.
Oh, thanks.
And that way they can connect with you, even if they have any questions or if they want to take some voice lessons, or if
free to call me,
Adele is
me,
listening, then get in touch. And
yeah, I wanted to help Robert Plant too back in the 80s when I heard he was losing his voice, but I couldn't get a hold of him either. Those guys live a very secluded life.
I could imagine. I mean, they're not going to just take anybody's phone call.
That's right. They can't.
Hey, this is Brad.
Yeah.
Who are you? Hang up the phone,
Yeah.
But, anything else you want to share with the listeners while we got you on here? I mean, anything that maybe I didn't touch on that you feel is important, or I mean, I know, I could probably get you back on down the road and you got a whole different story. I mean, you've been around Salt Lake for years. I mean, it sounds like
yeah, it's an interesting place musically. No, I can't really think of anything. Just to thank you, Chris, for taking the time with me and being a service to your community and getting us all together. Without people like you, it's very hard for all of us to communicate with each other and really help each other and move our lives better and move forward.
Absolutely. Well, we all influence each other, and I hope that by, like I was mentioning to you, I would have probably never had a chance to cross paths with you if it wasn't for this podcast. And hopefully I want to just create a huge digital archive online of all the cool stuff going on in the Salt Lake City area.
That's what I read. That's why, I saw that and I thought, well, this guy is, he's very community oriented. I want to know who he is.
Yeah.
I guess the only other thing I can think of is that part of why Seth Riggs and I split was he decided to kind of try to make his teaching a self-teaching method and industrialize it, so to speak, commercialize it, put it all around the world and so forth. And so he created a phrase called speech-level singing.
Okay.
And to really transfer that information to something that a lot of people in the music industry would understand, it just means bel canto, which means natural voice. And of course, that's the basis of what I do. So if you're looking for a speech-level singing teacher, the three best people in the world are Seth Riggs, Roger Love, and me. So if you're looking for that, you can get that from me as well. I don't really push that term a lot because like I said, I don't want to industrialize what I do. I want it to stay first rate, first quality, one-on-one. I don't want to release any books or DVDs that don't work because, let's talk about this for a second. If you buy a DVD on how to sing, I don't care how great the teacher is who made it, what you're going to miss is feedback.
Very true.
And singers are blind. We cannot see our own instrument. So we could be doing the vocal exercise with a DVD, think we're doing it perfectly, and be doing it horribly. And then we're going to develop that habit over time because we thought we were doing it right.
And nobody was there to give you feedback.
Right. And I've actually had some clients who have studied with these DVDs and actually come up with habits I've never seen before that are wrong.
Wow.
Because they didn't know what they were doing. In other words, I would recommend that if you're just going to sing for the sake of singing, you don't care about getting any better, you're better off without a DVD or a CD. Just do what you think comes naturally to you. You'd be better off.
So you don't create the bad habits.
Yeah, because they're very expensive to break. And they take a long time. And so I will never release anything like that I know of. I am considering releasing a DVD on how to imitate other singers because that, I think, is just music, just general music principles.
Yeah.
And you don't have to be able to see your voice to do that. But if you want to know how Adam Levine sings a high A correctly, then you need to study with a voice coach. Obviously, I can't handle everybody, so I'm recommending any voice coach out there who understands Adam Levine's technique. If you want to know how Adam Levine phrases, that can be taught without without getting into a lot of really crazy bad habits and a lot of feedback. But even still at that, if you want to learn an artist style, I would suggest you work with somebody who understands that style and can give you some feedback. So I'm very reticent about this whole revolution of DVDs and schools of 100 people who supposedly can all teach the same technique and so forth, because I just don't feel that that's high quality.
Yeah.
But obviously I'm not on obvious to me, I'm not trying to make it illegal or anything dumb like that, because I think people should be able to make their own choices.
Yeah.
But I think people should understand as singers they are blind, and they do need a seeing eye person to get them through learning how to get around their own house, so that eventually they don't need the seeing eye person anymore. In other words, a great voice coach should be somebody you don't need.
Okay.
After a period of time. You should be sighted. You should be able to say, I know I'm doing this right. I've had plenty of feedback on it. I know how it feels, and I can feel very confident in myself that this is
the right way to do it. Yeah.
Yeah. Or this is wrong, and I'm going to avoid this. Either way, but DVDs cannot do that.
Yeah.
Berkeley has an online course, and I think it's probably better than most because at least you get corrected once a week. You still are going through a canned program that cannot really address your personal needs, and every singer, because we're blind, has entirely different habits. And so I would always recommend, if you really want to improve your singing, find a voice coach.
And you're the man for that, though.
Well, I'm one of them, but, I have a limited amount of time. And so obviously, I can't teach everybody in New York and LA and Nova Scotia or whatever. I mean, so it just as a basic principle, I would just like to say to everybody, I really think if you really care about your voice and the habits you're developing, that you find somebody one-on-one.
Absolutely.
That you get that direct feedback. Even choirs, singers who try to learn from their choir teachers get really confused.
I could imagine.
Because they don't have the choir teacher saying, well, when I made this suggestion, I only meant one guy.
Yeah.
The other 3 people, the other 20 in the choir may actually be doing it right. But now they think they've got to change because the choir teacher said, everybody should do it this way. Well, they don't know they're already doing it right. So they change their habit and it has to be corrected later on. So, I mean, obviously everybody can't afford
a voice coach.
Yeah, or is even that interested. But if you are that interested, if it really does matter to you what road you're on, I like to use the example if you're looking to go to Mexico and you're a blind person and somebody gives you a map, you could end up in Canada and not have a clue.
Very true.
So if you really care about getting to Mexico, find a coach. If you don't really care where you end up, don't worry about it. But if you really care about getting to that right place in the right way and come out with really positive results, and I always recommend a coach. Absolutely. But I appreciate you saying, yeah, I'm one of them.
No, I think I definitely hope some people get in touch with you. And if they heard you on the podcast, tell them so they know. So,
let us know.
It'd be kind of neat to see if anybody comes out of the closet and says, "Oh, or out of the woodwork," I guess you would say. Yeah. But anyways, thank you very much. Seriously, I learned a lot tonight, and I appreciate you coming on. So thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you so much, Brad, for sitting down with me, sharing your story on how you became a voice coach, some of the musicians and actresses that you were able to help out along the way. Again, you could connect with Brad. Go to iamsaltlake.com/episode 39. I'm going to have the website and all of that information to get in touch. Drop him a line. Tell him you heard him on the I Am Salt Lake podcast. Tell him what you think. Again, we are online, iamsaltlake.com. You can listen to all the episodes. Our voicemail, 385-202-5926. We're on Twitter. Connect with me on Twitter at I Am Salt Lake. Trying to keep you up to date with everything and anything Salt Lake City. And also Facebook, I Am Salt Lake as well. So connect with me. If you do like the project that I'm doing, go to iamsaltlake.com/donate. Kick over $1 or $2. Helps fund the project, helps keep it alive, helps keep it moving forward. Because I got nowhere but up that I'm going with this podcast. I love it. I love you guys. You guys are what keeps me going. If you want to be a guest on my show, I'd love to bring you on. iamsaltlake@gmail.com. That's going to be your best bet. Drop me a line. Tell me what you're about. Tell me that you'd love to come on and share your story. I got some really, really fun interviews lined up for February. I'm also going to be a guest on a few podcasts as well as a couple radio shows. So make sure you're following me on Twitter or Facebook. Feel free to add me as a friend on Facebook. It's just facebook.com/Holifield. HOLIFIELD. That way you can kind of keep up to date on all of the guest podcasts and radio spots that I am on throughout the month of February. A lot of really fun things. Come on the I Am Salt Lake podcast. I'd love to bring you on and talk to you and see what you think of this beautiful city. Anyways, I am going to end this podcast with one of a song by a band called September Say Goodbye. It's called Not Forever. I'm going to actually be bringing them on the podcast. I think they're scheduled to come on about March. I'm going to play one of their songs, Not Forever. September Say Goodbye. Thank you for listening to another episode of the I Am Salt Lake podcast. You guys have a great night.
Keeps tearing us apart, tearing us apart, tearing us apart. The sun, I keep hope that the damage is done. The damage done. The damage done. damage done.
Tonight we'll collect the stars. The moonlight, it can be ours. To surge inside our broken hearts and
This is not forever. Hey girl, what are you afraid of?
hey boy, let's find out what you're made of.
We'll give this symphony a sound. Whoa, whoa. After today, there's no tomorrow.
Hold on, my love, just one more day.
We'll breathe life into these words. This is not forever. Whoa, whoa, whoa. This is not forever. Whoa, whoa.
Hey boy, you know I make your heart stop.
Hey girl, the temperature is rising up. Sound off the anarchy of passion. Our walls of all come crashing down. Crashing down. Crashing down. Crashing down. Oh.
Tonight will be the start. Range our lines and break apart. Lies that we used to tell us.
This is not forever. Hey girl, what are you afraid of?
Hey boy, let's find out what you're made of.
We'll give this symphony a sound. Whoa, whoa. After today, there's no tomorrow.
Hold on, my love, just one more day.
We'll breathe life into these words. This is not forever. Whoa, whoa, whoa. This is not forever. Whoa, whoa. Tonight, there are no more stars. Set fire to these reckless hearts. Go down to the house of cards and burn it to the ground.
Tonight there are no more stars. Set fire to these reckless hearts. Go down to the house of cards and burn it to the ground.
Tonight, as the earth will shake, we'll make our stand, we'll set our fate. The sound, the voice escalates, and burn it to the ground. Hey girl, what are you afraid of?
Hey boy, let's find out what you're made of.
We'll give this symphony a sound. Whoa, whoa. After today, there's no tomorrow.
Hold on, my love, just one more day.
We'll breathe life into these words. This is not forever.